All right, everybody, welcome back to another Monday stream. Sorry again about last night. I have no idea why the stream did not immediately start as soon as I hit the start stream, but okay, lesson learned, not doing the schedule thing anymore, and I'll just do it manually from now on. Blech. Words. But anyway, so I made a bit of an ass of myself in last week's stream, I will admit, when I kind of went on a little mini tirade about Bob Kane. And for those of you who don't know, Bob Kane, or Robert Kane, was the co-creator of Batman. And I don't know why, but for the longest time, I always assumed he was the writer and not the artist. I don't know why, but I think I must have watched a video or something where somebody accidentally said that Bill Finger was the artist, and so I just got that mixed up. But I figured, you know what? If I messed it up that badly, then I should make the next artist stream be about Bob Kane. Learn a little bit more about him. Maybe even learn a little bit more about what the heck the situation was with Batman and see what else he did, Even though, from what I've heard, I'm already a little bit biased against this guy, maybe we can all learn something today. Alright, so, as we do with all of these streams, well, not all of them, but you know what I mean, we are going to start with the Wikipedia article, and I think this has to be the first one where... Look at that! Look at this! It's not even like a 3-inch long introductory paragraph. Oh, why is it so small? And of course there was another Bob Kane. That is just so bizarre that there are two Bob Kanes and both of them were painters. I'm glad that this one was the first one to come up, but, okay. Bob Kane, born Robert Kane, was an American comic book writer, animator, and artist who co-created Batman and created many early Eisner Comic Book Hall of Fame in 1996. And OBS, I swear to God, you better behave this time. So, why is it so small? Okay, so, alright, early life, born in New York City, Augusta and Herman Kahn, as an engraver, his parents were Ashkenazi Jewish descent. Okay, this is probably going to sound super offensive, but why were so many of the early comic book creators of Jewish descent? I don't know why, but that's why was that? That's a little odd how so many of them were of Jewish descent, but okay. High school friends with fellow cartoonist and future spirit creator Will Eisner. Robert Kahn graduated from DeWitt Clinton High School, then legally changed his name to Robert Kane. He studied art at Cooper Union before joining the Max Fleischer Studio as a trainee animator in the year of 1934. Again, why is it so small? There's gotta be more about him. Okay, so there does seem to be a little bit more down here, but I'm just a little baffled on... Because it's okay, he created more characters, why haven't they been listed up here? Anyways, alright, comics. He entered the comics field 2 years later, 1936, freelancing original material to editor Jerry Iger's comic book, Wow, What a Magazine, including his first pencil and ink work on the serial Haram Hick. That's interesting. The following year, Kane began to work at Iger's subsequent studio, Eisner and Iger, which was one of the first comic book packagers and produced comics on demand for publishers entering the new medium during its late 30s and 40s golden age.
30s and 40s golden age.
40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s golden age. 40s Okay. Alright, among his work. Peter Pup. Wags reprinted Fiction House's Jumbo Comics. Kane produced, worked through Eisner and Iger for two of the companies that would later merge to form DC Comics, including the humor feature Ginger Snap. Okay. Oscar the Gumshoe. And Professor Doolittle. Okay. Alright. In early 1939, DC's success with the seminal hero Superman in Action Comics prompted editors to scramble for more such heroes. In response, Bob Kane conceived the Batman. Kane said his influences for the character included actor Douglas Fairbanks' film portrayal of the swashbuckler Zorro. Alright, Leonardo da Vinci's diagram of the orthopter. Let's see, what was that thing? So I think I know what we're talking about. Oh. So just, alright. Flying machine with huge bat-like wings. And the 1930 film The Bat Whisperers, based on Mary Reinhardt's mystery novel The Circular Staircase. Bill Finger joined Bob Kane's Nesset studio in 1938, an aspiring writer and part-time shoe salesperson. He had met Kane at a party, and Kane later offered him a job ghostwriting the strips Rusty and Clip Carson. He called that Kane had an idea for a character called Batman, and he'd like me to see the drawings. I went over to Kane's, and he had drawn a character who looked very much like Superman, with kind of reddish tights, I believe, with boots, no gloves, no gauntlets, with a small domino mask, swinging on a rope. He had two stiff wings that were sticking out, looking like bat wings. Under it was a big sign, Batman. Finger said he offered such suggestions as giving the character a cowl and a scalloped cape instead of wings, adding gloves, leaving the mask's eye holes blank to connote mystery, and removing the bright red section of the original costume, suggesting instead a gray and black color scheme. I think this is the reason why I thought for the longest time Bill Finger was the artist, because it's like he seems to be the one who was designing the look of Batman more than anything. And I don't know. I still to this day have no idea where the wires got crossed. Alright, Finger additionally said his suggestions were influenced by Lee Falk's The Phantom, a syndicated, The Phantom, which Kane was familiar with as well. Okay, so Batman, and Robin. Alright. Finger recalled that Robin was an outgrowth of a conversation I had with Bob. I said, Batman was a combination of Douglas Fairbanks and Sherlock Holmes. Holmes had his Watson. The thing that bothered me was that Batman didn't have anyone to talk to, and it got a little tiresome always having him thinking. I found that as I went along, Batman needed a Watson to talk to. That's how Robin came to be. Bob called me over and said he was going to put a boy in the strip to identify with Batman. I thought it was a great idea. And I think so many people had an irrational hatred for Robin when he came out, apparently. And people to this day argue whether Robin was necessary or not. But I think that the idea of Robin in and of itself is kind of a cute idea. I mean, first off, Dark Knight and his little squire, and also, have a little kid running around with Batman for other little kids to identify with. So I don't understand where all the hate came from, and quite a few people within DC had a particular hatred for Dick Grayson, like an almost seething hatred of Dick Grayson, and it's very bizarre to me, because the only thing the dude did was exist. At least with Jason Todd, I can understand a little bit more of the hatred for Jason Todd, because apparently he was annoying and nobody really liked him. Still don't think they should have killed him off the way they did, but whatever. Alright. Sorry. Alright. We know about Batman. We know about Robin. We know about Joker. Inspired by The Man Who Laughs. Da 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 da. Okay, what else did Bob Kane do? Alright, here we go. Other characters. Alright. Nearly everyone seems to agree that Two-Face was Kane's brainchild exclusively. Catwoman, originally introduced by Kane with no costume as the Cat. Alright. I mentioned, I just felt that women were feline. Kane created the Scarecrow. Clayface. Alright, according to Kane, he drew the Penguin. So, seems like most of his... It's pretty much just mostly Batman. Like, really? There has... I mean, we saw the earlier works, but there had to have been more. Alright, in 1966, Kane retired from DC Comics, choosing to focus on fine art. Okay, so he decided to just dip out of comics and go to fine art. Alright, okay, I guess I can see that. As Kane's comic book work tapered off in the 1960s, he parlayed his Batman status into minor celebrity. Enjoyed a post-comics career in television animation, creating the characters Courageous Cack and Cool McCool, and as a painter showed his works in art galleries, although some of these paintings were produced by ghost artists. Wait, what? Wait, what? Hold on. Okay, archived in 2009. Wait. He was trying to pawn off other people's paintings as his own? Okay, that is super sketchy. Alright, DC Comics named Kane in 1985 as one of the honorees in the company's 50th anniversary publication, 50 Who Made Great DC Great. In 1989, Kane published the autobiography Batman and Me. With an updated edition Batman and Me, the saga continues in 1996. Okay, worked as consultant on the Batman film and its 3 sequels. Alright, Stan Lee interviewed Kane in a documentary series, The Comic Book Greats. Okay. What the heck? Okay. So, I'm gonna Google this, Haram Hick character, because I would like to see other characters that he worked on. Because, obviously, like, alright. So, obviously, he was the original Batman artist. Alright, come on. Down we go. Yeah, and... Whoop. And he basically created the template for... Well, co-created the template for Batman. Still can't believe he really tried to make it a red color scheme. Like, Batman obviously needs to be, like, dark. But, anyway. So, we got this. Oh, that's right. Apparently somewhere down the line they came up with Batwoman and Batgirl, who are supposed to be, like, girlfriends to Batman and Robin. And then, of course, they turned Batwoman into a lesbian, which... Okay. And Batgirl would kind of retain her girlfriend status, but became more of her own-ish thing. I mean, they are... He was a good artist, and his artwork does look legitimately fun. Yeah, so apparently this was the original design for Batman. Yeah, that was not a good look. Sorry, but that is not a good look. Yeah, good thing Bill Finger stepped in and is like, yeah, nah. Alright. So, that's his work on Batman. I want to look up this other character, because I had never even heard of this character. Alright. Oh, okay. Oh, a sucker here here's where I eat. Cab, sir, I'll take you to a good hotel. I'll get a commission from Moe's Flophouse for this guy. Well, I reckon there'll be okay. Okay, so it's supposed to be like a cutesy little, comedy comic. Alright. Not entirely sure why they picked Haram for his name. Is Haram a name? First name? Or was that supposed to be a play on something? Okay. Alright. Among his work there was the talking Peter Pup. Okay, come on, search you. Alrighty. Oh, it looks like something out of the Fleischers. Okay, so it's just like a cute little puppy comic. Alright, is there anything else? Huh, he kind of looks like the crud. What is that character's name? The, wizard who gave Shazam his powers. Alright, this is gonna bug me. Right. Alright, so it's just Shazam the Wizard. Alright. Alright. Shazam is such an odd ball of a character. Not odd as in super strange, but odd as in, he's kind of in a very weird spot, because he's also supposed to be Captain Marvel, but obviously that was not going to work. There's no way Marvel would have been okay with that, so they had to figure something out. But how about we watch a couple of interviews of Mr. Bob Kane before we get into another article. Here is from Joe Blow Superheroes. Bob Kane visits the Batman set behind the scenes. Oh, this will be interesting.
Exactly 50 years ago in New York City, an 18-year-old boy sat down and created Batman. Now Bob Kane can see his invention spring into life like never before.
Well, I was born with a proverbial golden pencil in my hand. I guess I've been drawing ever since I was 5 years old. When I was a kid, I was always interested in the innovative stages of the locomotive, of the steam engine, of the flying machine. All automobiles, all early innovations always fascinated me. And I saw this book by Leonardo da Vinci when I was 13. And da Vinci had a quote, "Your bird shall have no other wings but that of a bat." And he actually, there it was for me, a Batman.
Today, that vintage edition of Detective Comics is worth more than $20,000 and many millions more.
It's worth a hell of a lot more now.
Are being spent on the Goober Peters movie of Batman from Warner Brothers. Starring Jack Nicholson as the Joker, Michael Keaton in the title role, and Kim Basinger as Vicky Vale.
Don't kill me, man! I'm not going to kill you. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
He'll be the Batman of the night.
There was so much controversy way back when about Michael Keaton being Batman, because he was more of a comedic actor, so quite a few people did not really see him as Batman, which I guess is fair, but he still did a good job. I mean, people thought that Heath Ledger wouldn't be a good Joker, but he managed to pull off a very terrifying performance. Some people like Heath Ledger, some people don't. I personally liked his interpretation of the Joker. He's not my favorite Joker, but I did like his performance.
90s because he's a realistic Batman. He's not the typical, atypical image. And sometimes when you go against typecasting, you have even a better show. When I heard about them doing the movie again at Pinewood, the only actor I could think of was Jack Nicholson. He is the Joker. He's not the opposite.
Always brings a smile to my face.
Here I am at Pinewood Studios in England, looking at Gotham City transposed from my hometown of New York. When I was just a kid growing up in New York City, walking in the mean streets of Manhattan,
That looks like a set
envisioned
town.
Gotham the way I see it now at Pinewood. They've got every brick and every building and cornerstone here. It's just marvelous.
Okay, that was cute. Alright, so let's get into an interview. So this was from way back in 2008. And looks like we can listen to it.
The second installment in the latest cinematic incarnation of the costume crime fighter known as the Batman opens next Friday. Christian Bale returns as Bruce Wayne, the billionaire with a villain-hunting alter ego, and Michael Caine once again plays his loyal butler, Alfred.
People are dying, Alfred. What would you have me do?
Endure, Master Wayne. Take it. They'll hate you for it, but that's the point of Batman. He can be the outcast. He can make the choice that no one else can make.
When did Bob Kane pass away? Alright, so he passed away in 1998. So, I wonder what he would have thought of the Nolan trilogy.
Right choice.
Today I found out what Batman can't do. He can't endure this. Today you get to say I told you so.
Today, I don't want to.
Next year will mark the 70th anniversary of the Batman character. Cartoonist Bob Kane created the character in 1939 when he was a teenager. Batman has been in continuous publication ever since. Kane drew Batman himself for DC Comics until 1966, the year the TV series premiered, and took a camp pop art approach to the character. When Bob Kane gave up drawing Batman comics, he started painting Batman on canvas. Kane died in 1998. In 1990, Terry Gross talked to him and asked about the creation of the Caped Crusader.
Why did you make Batman someone without superpowers? I mean, he was a regular mortal who was very, very fit and very clever, but he didn't really have superpowers like Superman did.
Exactly. For one thing, I didn't want to emulate Superman and imitate it because I thought maybe they wouldn't want that. And I wanted to come up with something original, for one thing. And secondly, I felt that every person that doesn't have superpowers could relate to Batman a lot easier than they could to Superman. In other words, you didn't have to come from another planet to be a superhero. All you had to do was be born rich and build your body into perfection and have the urge to go out and fight crime. So most people...
Yeah, totally relatable. But I get what he was saying.
Most people like the idea that Batman never had superpowers. They can relate to him a lot quicker than to a superhero with superpowers.
Now, here you were a Jewish kid growing up in the Bronx, right? Your superhero is named Bruce Wayne. I mean, what a very not Jewish name.
Well, it's an alliteration of Bob Kane.
Oh, okay.
Bruce Wayne.
Well, I mean-
alliteration.
Kind of an odd question to ask. I mean, none of the other Jewish... Well, I mean, Kirby did make a couple of his characters Jewish, like the Thing, he made him Jewish. But, I mean, I don't understand. So they need to have Jewish names?
Well,
alliteration. I wanted it to sound... I wanted to be Bruce Wayne in my reverie and in my daydreams. I felt, instead of a poor kid, I imagined I'd like to be a rich playboy, and.
I wonder why he changed his name to Robert Kane. Because it doesn't say here why he changed his name. Okay, so it's from Batman and Me. Because with Kirby, I kind of understand it. He was trying out different pen names, and he was naming himself after an actor he really liked. But I wonder why Bob Kane changed his name. Maybe because he thought it sounded cooler?
Playboy and fight crime at night, because I hate all injustices in the world.
Would it have been possible to have made a Jewish superhero, or was that out of the question at the time?
Well, only for the Jewish Forward, which is a newspaper in the Bronx. But that's the only paper that would take a Jewish hero.
Tell me why you decided to draw Batman in tights and shorts. Now, I know Superman was drawn that way.
Well, actually, it's called the Union Suit character, and for whatever reason, Superman started it, and it seemed to work. And mine was second, except I used a bat cape and the bat symbols, the bat mystique, which spread out into the bat cave, the Batmobile, the Batarang, and so forth. I used the entire bat mystique to create my bat world. Superman only had a telephone booth. So mine is really more merchandisable, so to speak, and also more...
I mean, yeah, he did make a very plump cash cow with Batman. I mean, you got like car sets you could do all sorts of action figures, and it is a very fun world.
Mysterioso, yeah. Somehow you enhance an idea. You begin with it. It's just a germ of an idea, and as I studied the history of comics in America, all the comics heroes were very crude at the beginning, and they developed along the way. Like Dick Tracy didn't have a two-way wristwatch when he started. That came along later.
You started off doing slapstick comics and then turned to Batman. How did your drawing style change to create the Batman mood?
Well, I was a very good copyist, Terry, and I was able to copy superheroes at an early age. At 15, I could copy Flash Gordon almost as well as the artist who drew him, Alex.
Oh, okay. Actually, that makes a lot of sense because you look at the original design. Let's see if I can bring that up. Again. No. Down. He does kind of look a little like Flash Gordon, doesn't he? Let me bring that up. Well, okay, not exactly, but he's got like the red color scheme. Of course, the Flash Gordon movie. I wonder where the original OG. But yeah, he got okay. I'm seeing a little bit more of it now. Okay, that's not Bob Kane style, that, obviously. But the original design, okay, yeah, I see it now. I definitely see it. Yeah. So they do look very similar. keep myself organized.
And I used to dabble in copying all the comics, slapstick as well as the illustrative kind. And the reason for my adaptation and switching over to the illustrative art rather than slapstick art was simply because there was more money in the superhero. Like when I asked Vincent Sullivan how much money the Superman artists were making, they were making $1,600 between them during in any given week.
That didn't age well. Maybe I should do the Superman creators sometime.
And I was making $25, so I did that because of the money, basically. Intrinsically, I really would rather draw slapstick comics. I've always been a great lover of the early Mutt and Jeff and Popeye and Maggie and Chiggs, and those were the comics that I grew up on, that I wanted to emulate and become a slapstick comic artist, but I realized that the illustrative superhero was probably my forte for making money and fame.
Batman was...
Well, yeah, you gotta follow where the money goes. And especially back in those days, where if the tides are changing, you gotta strap in and get going.
Obviously inspired by the success of Superman. What was the reaction initially of the Superman artists to Batman? Did they think that you were just stealing from them?
Well, that's a good question.
No, not really, because Batman really was nothing like Superman in costume or in the general genre. Superman came from Krypton, another planet, and he had superpowers. He could fly and leap great heights over buildings, where Batman was merely a mortal that wore a bat costume. And no, they weren't surprised, because they knew that there would be a whole slew of imitative superheroes to come, and mine was second. And frankly, Terry, after Batman and Superman, there really wasn't another original superhero in the last 50 years. All they are offshoots, in one way or another, of the costumes, of new costumes based on Superman and Batman. Few of them don't have superpowers like Bruce Wayne, Batman. Most of them do have superpowers, but nobody other than Spider-Man, which came along about 25 years later, and it's kind of a unique character, and it looks like a spider. It's amazing, though, how all the characters other than Superman took on the names of insects, animals, and so forth, if you want to analyze it.
Did you ever see a bat?
I guess it is and it isn't. I mean, when it comes to, like, real powers that we see every day, compared to humans, animals would be the closest we have. I mean, we have animals that can electrify their prey. We have animals that have venom that can either kill someone or paralyze someone. And of course, with Spider, you got the ability to make webbing. So it is very interesting, but it's also not very surprising.
Bat when you were growing up?
Well, I had great fears of bats, and therein lies an amazing dichotomy also. The fact that who thought any character with a name like a Batman would go, only because even my publisher at that time thought it was a very ominous name, and he suggested I change it. And I said, well, why don't we try one issue and we'll see how it goes. But when the issue sold out, and I came to him and I said, well, what about changing the name? Let's call him Irving Schwartz the Tailor or whatever. He laughed and he said, no, let's keep the name because, obviously the bottom line in any industry.
And he said that with a shit-eating grin.
Industry and motion pictures and comic books is money. If you're making money, you stay with it.
You drew Batman for DC Comics. You stayed with that house. What are some of the pros and cons of doing a comic for a comic book house like that? Who owns the rights to the characters, for instance?
Unfortunately, that's that's part of the negative part of the business, is that when you're young, you sell away your copyrights, and actually that happens with most of the cartoonists, and they owned the character at that time, and I couldn't take it elsewhere. And actually, I was making very good money, and in 1940, 41, I was making practically $1,000 a week. And so you're not about to leave, and $1,000 a week in 1940 was comparable to about $6,000 today a week. And so, being that they owned the copyright, I did the best I could at the time by compromising and getting a good piece of the action and a perpetuity contract. So therefore, I did rather well compared to some artists who sold it away and didn't get very much out of it.
Have you owned a piece of the merchandising over the years?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
It would be a little weird if he didn't, but yeah, I think that Eisner mentioned that in the interview we covered last week, where Bob Kane did give himself a very good deal when it came to the contract for Batman, when it came to like royalties and all that. Same can't be said for Bill Finger.
Yes, I do rather well.
Yeah, I'll bet, yeah.
I mean, all things being equal,
Yeah.
I'd love to own it, and I would have done 1,000% better, but I didn't do badly the way it turned out, and life is a compromise. If it weren't for the publisher, I probably, I never would have been where I am today. So, one hand washes the other.
Just briefly, can you tell us what you thought of the movie Batman? You were a consultant to that.
Yes, I was project consultant, and I did add a lot of my input. I drew the costumes. I said the costume has to be rigged with wire that when he jumps through a skylight, it'll billow out behind him like a bat. And I critiqued the script and so forth. I thought it was very true to the roots of Batman, the way I started it, whence it came. In other words,
That's actually very funny because quite a few fans disagree with you, Mr. Kane.
Batman had gone back to the mysterioso, dark, brooding Batman that I created in the early years. I love the campy version.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Because, yeah, Batman did start off being way more violent at the beginning and even had a gun, but they had to tone that down because, CCA.
Version, but never. I really prefer the dark, brooding version, and I think the sets were marvelous. The whole mood of the movie had a different film noir look, and look, it grossed over $250 million. It's one of the all-time top grosses in Hollywood from the time of its inception, and in Europe it'll probably make another $200 million. And plus the merchandising and the video cassettes, the Batman could very well go to $1 billion. That's more than any movie ever earned or ever will earn in the history of movies. And I love the movie. I thought it just was true to my original dark brooding. I was just worried it shouldn't turn into a campy TV show again, and it did not. It followed faithfully my early mood.
And then Schumacher came in and tried to turn it back into the campy version. And failed so miserably. I tried to watch Batman Forever because I am a fan of the Riddler, and I tapped out the minute I saw Jim Carrey trying his darndest to be Frank Gorshin, and he was not doing it well at all.
Mood of the genre of Batman.
Bob Kane, speaking to Terry Gross in 1990. He died in 1998. Next week, director Christopher Nolan takes his
Okay, so that's the end of that NPR. Remember when NPR actually had some good stuff and they weren't, really, weird? Alright, so you've probably picked up on the jabs and my previous comments and the title of this stream. Bob Kane has a very complicated legacy. Now, don't get me wrong, he is beloved for being a co-creator of Batman, and he deserves his dues for being the co-creator of Batman. However, he has not always been forthright with the fact that he is, in fact, a co-creator. There was Bill Finger coming in, and Bill Finger, for the longest time, barely got even a mention or a credit for Batman. So here's this article from Sci-Fi, The Complicated Legacy of Batman co-creator Bob Kane. Alright. Should October 24th be a day of celebration in the comics world? I don't know. Should it? That happens to be the birthday of Bob Kane, the co-creator of Batman. Kane, who died in 1998, helped bring to life one of the most popular characters in popular culture. That type of achievement should merit an annual pay raid being thrown in one's honor. Or parade. Ugh. An annual parade. I do not know why my brain went to pay grade. Whatever. Except that, according to nearly all accounts, the man who reaped the greatest rewards for the creation of the Dark Knight did so at the expense of others. To say Kane's legacy is complicated is to massively understate things. As a young man in the 1930s, Kane toiled at Eisner and Iger's studio, a sort of comic book factory that packaged comic books to serve the high demand for the then-fledgling comics industry. After Superman became a blockbuster hit for DC Comics, Kane had an idea for a different type of superhero, the Batman. Inspired by various pulp heroes, the character would be an instant hit upon his debut in Detective Comics number 27. Kane's early vision of the character included red tights and a winged costume. It was Bill Finger, who worked at Kane's studio as a ghostwriter, who would help create the visual aesthetic that would define Batman for all time. The cowl, the cape, the darker color scheme for all the costumes, all came from Finger. He came up with Gotham City, the Batcave, and the Batmobile, as well as Robin, Catwoman, and Commissioner Gordon. Finger even came up with the original story of Bruce Wayne. You tell me, remove all those elements, and is the Batman still Batman? Yeah, because it's like, if someone comes up with, like, a good chunk of what a character is, they should receive the credit. We had that debate with Stan Lee and Steve Ditko when it came to Spider-Man, where, yes, technically Stan Lee came up with the idea, but Ditko was the one who designed everything and gave everything its look. And co-wrote it. Because I do consider coming up with the panel layout and the visual storytelling to be part of writing the story. Kane was the rare Golden Age comic pro who had the foresight to negotiate a contract that earned him royalties. Because of that, from Batman's very first appearance in Tech 27, in which he was credited as Robert Kane, that's an interesting way to spell that, he always received credit and income. His contract with DC was one of the most lucrative in the industry at the time. What did Bill Finger get? Not a damn thing, besides his daily page rate, which, from what I understand back then, was not good. Finger's story is one of comics' true tragedies. Despite his incredibly important contributions, he died penniless in 1974. It wasn't until much later, thanks to folks in the comics press and author Mark Taylor Nobleman, who wrote the Finger biographical graphic novel Bill the Boy Wonder, that Finger received his proper due for his work in bringing Batman to life. It was during the mid-60s that Kane reached a crucial moment in his story, a moment where he could have done what his beloved Caped Crusader would be expected to do, the right thing. In 1965, after Finger made an appearance at one of the earliest comics fan conventions and discussed his role in creating Batman, Kane wrote a scathing letter to the Batmania fanzine denouncing Finger. Wow, did not know that. The full letter is reprinted on tomorrows.com. Here is a screen grab of a key part in the letter. Let's see if we can... Alright. Is it still up? let's see, how long is this letter? Because if it's too long... That is a very long letter. But I'll link this letter down in the description for you guys to look in. But the myth, Bob Kane is not the sole creator of Batman. I've heard this 1,000 times in my lifetime, that Batman was really created by Bill Finger, Jerry Robinson, Carmine Infantino, Jack Schiff, Julie Schwartz, my publisher, etc., etc., and my housekeeper. The truth, all hogwash. I, Bob Kane, am the sole creator of Batman. I created Batman in 1939, and it appeared, if memory serves me correctly, in Detective Comics as a 6 or 8 page story, and I signed the first strip, Robert Kane. So, yeah, bold-faced lie right there. And it's crazy that he actually wrote this letter to try and discredit Bill Finger. It's like, dude, what do you get discrediting a dude, someone you've worked with, who's helped you make you who you are? What do you get treating him like that? That just seems like a very crappy thing to do. He not only didn't give Finger his due, but issued a categorically a denial as was possible. Kane not only failed to do the right thing, he essentially called the man he once considered a friend a liar. Kane spent decades basically coasting on others' efforts to enjoy a cushy existence. While he did actually work on the Batman comic strip in the 1940s, for the next 15 to 20 years, guys like Dick Sprang and Shelley Moldoff worked as ghost artists, drawing the pages that Kane would sign his name to. Oh, that is even worse! To be fair, this was not an uncommon industry practice at the time, but Kane certainly seemed to take it further than most. Take the story that legendary Silver Age inker and Kane ghost, Joe Gilia, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, told me during an interview for the BTP podcast on the 80th anniversary of Batman. Gilia explained how Kane asked him to help out on a weekend TV show Kane hosted in the 1960s, on which he would draw comic characters. According to Gilia, Kane asked him to do a light pencil drawing beforehand that Kane would then trace over with a marker, letting the audience believe the drawing was all his. Wow, that's crappy. Kane used so many ghost artists throughout his career. Any original drawing or painting that comes to market as being done by Bob Kane is held up to great scrutiny by collectors. People simply don't trust that he did the work he signed his name to do. If it starts getting to the point where people just are automatically like, okay, did you actually draw this? Maybe it's time to fess up. Years later, Kane made a stunning admission in his autobiography, mostly written by someone else, naturally, that if he could do it all over again, he would give Finger his due credit on Batman. Now that my longtime friend and collaborator is gone, I must admit that Bill never received the fame and recognition he deserved, Kane wrote with Tom Andre in Batman and Me. He was an unsung hero. I often tell my wife if I could go back 15 years before he died, I would like to say, I'll put your name on it now. You deserve it. Bill Finger had been dead for more than 15 years at that point. Too little, too late. Kane's refusal to share the credit for his work on Batman wasn't just regulated to Finger. DC Comics has taken a lot of heat over the years for its seeming refusal to grant men like Finger and Jerry Robinson, widely known to have helped create the Joker, co-creator credit. But Kane's contract reportedly called for Kane and only Kane to get credit for Batman, and he did not hesitate to protect himself. Was it fear of losing money or his place in comics history? If it was the latter, it appears that damage is already done. The irony is that Kane could have helped his own cause if he had shown any inclination to give Finger official recognition during Kane's lifetime. Yeah, because as we can see, he's not a bad artist, and the fact that he helped co-create one of the most iconic pop cultural figures ever, that automatically would have won him a spot in any comic fan's history book. But it's just this controversy, it actually damaged his reputation more than it helped. At least Stan Lee had no choice but to admit that he worked with others. Because, yeah, he was not an artist at all. So he had no choice but to admit, yes, I worked with them. Even though he would still be a little weaselly when it came to admitting when someone helped co-create something. Alright, King. Alright. There are some who may want to compare Kane with his old pal Stan Lee, but it's not the same situation. Did Stan take too much credit for his work in creating so many Marvel heroes alongside Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko? Very likely. Could he have done more to ensure journalists gave proper credit to his co-creators? Undoubtedly. But what Lee didn't do was outright deny the contributions of Kirby, Ditko, Don Heck, and others. Yeah. He could not completely deny it. That's what Kane did. He lied about Finger's contributions to Batman. And even though creator credit wasn't the issue then that it is now, it still seems wrong. So what are we supposed to do with that? I know it's considered a societal norm not to speak ill of the dead, but are we really supposed to celebrate and honor a man whose actions in real life stand in such stark contrast to the heroic ideals displayed by the character he helped create? What is the conundrum of Bob Kane? Perhaps the real lesson in all this is to be very careful before deifying any creators of something you love, because it's very possible you don't know the whole story. Just like everybody else, I'm a huge Batman fan. I wish I could celebrate Kane's birthday, but I think instead I'll just rewatch the documentary Batman and Bill. So he was the writer of this article, Mike Avila, he was a lot harsher than I think even I was, even though I did throw in a few more swear words when it came to Bob Kane. But yeah, it's like, dude, all you had to do was give Finger credit and you wouldn't have this black mark on your reputation. Like, ironically, in a bid to protect his reputation as a creator, he ended up making himself look worse. So, yeah, that's why we say it's a very complicated legacy with Bob Kane. And this wasn't anything new. Like, there were ghost writers and ghost artists in the comic industry for pretty much since its inception, so this kind of situation isn't new. What is new, well, what's different with Bob Kane is just him flat out denying any help whatsoever. Alright, I think we got, that's enough of that for now. Let's watch a few more videos. The Two Masks of the Cape Crusader, an interview with Bob Kane. Because oh wow, that's a title. Bob Kane, genius or phony? Like I said, he does deserve his credit as a co-creator. It's just, he did pull a crappy thing.
On the Family Channel.
Next, a very special interview.
Lieutenant, is there a 6-foot bat in Gotham City?
And you're invited.
Come in. There's something strange going on here.
Vicky Vale.
Bruce Wayne.
And what do you do for a living?
Punch people in the face.
In 1989, Kim Basinger played Vicky Vale.
Why are you afraid of flying?
But the role was inspired years earlier.
At that time, I met a starlet at a party after the wrap of the big Columbia Picture serial. And she had a very breathy voice, and I thought she either had asthma or she was very passionate. Spoke in a kind of a sexy whisper. And I asked her what her name was, and she said, "My name is Norma Jean."
You will learn who Norma Jean was, plus many other surprising facts about the hit movie Batman and the top-rated Batman TV series in our very special Family Channel presentation.
I used to own the box set of the Batman 66 show because it looked so corny and fun, and it was a very fun show, and unfortunately I did sell it, though. I'm kicking myself about that because I would have loved to sit down and watch a few episodes with my boyfriend.
I'm Batman.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I couldn't recognize your face. But your physique was very familiar.
That was another thing in the Batman 66 show. If you had a vagina and you were in the Batman 66 show, you had a thing for Batman. Like, I'm sorry, that was the rule. If you were a woman in that show, you had a thing for Batman. That's just the flat-out rule of the show.
Pretty hard to realize that I created Batman 50 years ago. It seems like only yesterday. The old cliche, but it's true. I was 18 years old, and I don't feel much older today than 18. And as I look at my characters here on the drawing board, Batman and Robin, Catwoman, Penguin, and the Joker, it seems like I just created them a day ago. Batman, after 50 years, has had many incarnations. When I started Batman, he was kind of a vigilante, dark and brooding and mysterioso and Dracula-like. He was a loner the first year before Robin.
I think we should probably skip the, just in case we get copyright struck.
You know, maybe I could fix you up with Robin. Well, I'll never work. He's too young. That age, all they're interested in is baseball.
I had three major influences on my creation of Batman. One was Leonardo da Vinci's flying machine. I saw a book of inventions by Leonardo da Vinci when I was, 12 years old or so. And he had the first flying machine 500 years ago was a man on a sled with huge bat wings. And Da Vinci had a quote. And as I recall, the quote said, "Your bird shall have no other model. Remember that your bird shall have no other model but that of a bat." There it was. I put it away in my memory bank, and my second influence as a kid is I used to love the movies. And Douglas Fairbanks Sr. was a swashbuckling hero of the silent film. And he did a movie called The Mark of Zorro. And he wore kind of a stocking mask with slits for the eyes. And he put on a sword to his side. And he had a black horse Raven, which exited from a cave at the side of his mansion. And lo and behold, years later, said of things to come. That's why I got the idea for the Batcave coming out of the Wayne Manor and the Batmobile instead of a horse.
I've only ever seen the new Zorro. I'm sorry, guys, but I've never seen the black and white Zorro show. I've never seen the earlier Zorro movies, but I remember watching the two newish Zorro movies. I wonder if they came out in like the early 2000s, if I remember correctly.
Turbine speed. Ready to move out.
Gosh, YouTube, you better not help me on this.
The third one was a movie called The Bat by Mary Roberts Reinhardt, the mystery writer. And the Bat in that film was a villain, but he wore a weird bat costume.
Nice outfit.
Well, citizen, to what do we owe the pleasure of this visit?
I was hoping to revive my TV show, People Are Funny. But I can't seem to find any unusual people in Gotham City.
No, this is just an ordinary, fine, upstanding metropolis. Not many weirdos.
That is one thing I will give Batman 66 credit for. Yes, it was goofy and hokey, but they'll just say these weird things dead-faced, and everyone is just supposed to take it seriously. Like, they had to have known that this was corny as all hell. They had to have known. Nobody thought that Batman 66 was super serious. It was one of the goofiest shows I've ever seen.
Any particular types in mind?
Oh, someone perhaps with a strange costume?
Those were my three major influences on my creation of the Batman.
We'll return in a moment to our special, The Two Masks of the Caped Crusader. And remember, you can enjoy the campy comedy of Batman and Robin every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Family Channel.
Out of the mouths of boy wonders oftentimes come gems.
Watch Batman, weekdays at 5, 4 Central on the Family Channel.
When I was at DC Comics in 1938, the first superhero was created called Superman by Siegel and Schuster. And they were making about $1,500 between them. That was a lot of money in those days in 1938, comparable today to probably $5,000 a week or $10,000 a week. And I was a poor kid from Bronx, New York, and I was only earning about $20, $25 a week doing fill-in cartoons. So one day I went over to the editor, Vincent Sullivan, and I said, hey, would you like to take on another super-duper character? And he said, sure, we're doing great with Superman. Can you come up with something? I said, for $1,500 a week, I can come up with anything, believe me. And I want to make my character different, not a copycat character, Superman. I think it's the simplicity of the line. Like, when I was discussing drawing with Walt Disney at one point in time, and we were discussing why some characters catch on and some do not. And Mickey Mouse has a very simply drawn figure as Batman is, and very recognizable. And the main thing to all comic strip creations, basically, is to have it recognized immediately. And the way I drew Batman at the beginning, he was more simplified than a lot of the ghost artists that took over in the latter years, where they overdraw it and they put too many lines on the head and the face and the figure and so forth. But I just had it kind of simple, where everybody would recognize it immediately. So it's very easy to draw. Actually, the way I draw is I see the vision on paper before I even put the line down. It's kind of like my eyes like a camera. And no matter what I draw, I just visualize it immediately, whether it be a locomotive or I may do some research on...
That is not his style.
You know, things like trains or automobiles or buildings. But when it comes to figures, I could just kind of make them up. I just visualize what I want to put down, and lo and behold, I see it, and then I just...
Oh, crap. Who am I thinking of? I think it was Neil Adam. Yeah, that looks a lot very similar to that. So the jawline and the way that Batman's drawn here, comparing it to... Alright, so maybe it's not exactly Neil Adams, but that's not Bob Kane's style. I mean, granted, yes, artists' styles can change over the years, and I would not doubt that his particular style did, in fact, change over the years, but that's not his original Batman design.
Just trace it in my mind's eye, and I guess that's my talent. I was born with it. The gift, like other gifts. Some people have natural singing voices, some people like to act, and they have a natural talent for that at the beginning.
That's not Neil Adams, but it's very similar to it.
It was a doodler from way back.
Why am I blanking on this artist's
name? I used to doodle on all my school books in class, and It got me in a lot of trouble. Well, I was giving you a bibliography of the Batman. So that weekend, I created a character with stiff bat wings behind him, brought it in on a Monday, and I said, there it is, the Batman.
Like, in comparison, this is more of the Bob Kane style. Let's see. And again, it would have been fine if he just did his own style. It's just very odd. That he would...
And Vincent Sullivan liked it and bought it immediately as a second superhero for DC Comics. And as they say, it became history after that. My famous signature with a big O, a box around it. And then I created Robin a year later in the image of a boy wonder, visualizing that all boys his age, 13, 14, would visualize themselves fighting crime alongside Batman, a superhero.
Sir, please help me, please.
What's the matter?
A horrible man dressed in green tights just leapt out of the bushes and seized my little brother.
He's not even questioning the fact that he's talking to a woman dressed up like Little Bo Peep. I love it so much.
What? Dressed in green?
Yes, and he shouted the strangest thing. He said, a clue. He shouted at me, and what is a bonnet, not a bonnet?
The Riddler. And that clue's a snap. A bonnet is not a bonnet when it becomes a young woman.
Oh, how clever you are.
That riddle doesn't even make sense!
And then, lo and behold, we needed a villain. And I used to play practical jokes on my friends as a kid. So I thought of, and I used to play cards a lot when I was a youngster, and I remembered the Joker playing cards.
Thank heaven for my delicious sense of humor.
Gotham City always brings a smile to my face.
Bash them, crash them.
I have a little whiff of my policy.
A rhinestone bracelet, a fox fur stole, and 1 full quart of imported Mexican perfume.
That's a big bottle of perfume! My goodness!
Gee, Joker. I'm sorry I sassed you.
Turned out she was became Marilyn Monroe. At that time, we went down to the beach one afternoon.
Wait a minute.
Charlotte at a party after the wrap of the big Columbia Picture cereal. And as it turned out, she was became Marilyn Monroe. At that time, we went down to the beach one afternoon on a Sunday, and I did some sketches of her. And I went back to New York, and I created a character called Vicky Vale, photojournalist, which was in Marilyn Monroe's image. And I told them to give her blonde hair, but the colorist gave her red hair, in the comic book, that is. And lo and behold, 40 years later, in the new Batman motion picture, we have Kim Basinger playing Vicky Vale.
Yeah, that happened a lot way back in the day, too, where either there was a miscommunication that happened in the office and characters had different colored hair than they were supposed to. And actually, the very famous one is with Lex Luthor and why he is depicted as bald. It turns out that it was another miscommunication and a little bit of an oopsie where one of the henchmen accidentally got labeled as Lex Luthor, even though it was supposed to be this red-haired dude. Let's see if we can pull that up. It's a very funny situation. Yeah. Published, made his first appearance since then. Alright. Yeah, because he's supposed to have, like, he was supposed to have red hair, but he accidentally got, but the bald henchman got labeled. Yeah, here we go. His first story, Luther is depicted as a diabolical genius. Yeah, so that's what he was supposed to look like. Hands. With full red hair. Less than a year later, however, an artist's mistake resulted in Luther being depicted as completely bald in a newspaper strip. The original error is attributed to Leo Nowak and the studio artist who illustrated for Superman dailies during this period. Alright. This took Nowak. Yeah, but I feel like Luther rocks the bald look better than the redhead look. I don't know why, it's just the way he rocks it. This is just a more iconic look to him. It actually makes him stand out among other villains, oddly enough.
Why are you afraid of flying?
We'll be right back with our special, The Two Masks Duplicate.
To a show. It's really tough art. It's a great show. Batman TV show, we had almost every famous actor in Hollywood that vied for a cameo role because it was so campy and they wanted their children to see them in it, you know. And we had, oh my goodness, we had Liberace and Tallulah Bankhead, even John Gielgud, the Shakespearean actor, had played one of the villains.
Vincent Price, too. Vincent Price was Egghead. Of course, and from what I understand with Vincent Price, he actually was a very, chill dude, and he was kind of a bit of a goofy guy himself. Yeah, I think he even had a cooking show, too.
There were so many. Of course, there was Frank Gorshin, who played the Riddler, and Burgess Meredith played the Penguin. He was perfect for it. Yeah, quack, 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 quack. He was terrific.
You're arresting me?
As a duly deputized agent of the law,
the bad cuffs.
What I hereby do.
Really, gentlemen, I'm dismayed. This morning's Gotham City.
Your Highness, please don't hate me for mentioning them, but what about Batman and Robin? Batman and Robin.
The book, Eggy Poo?
Sorry if it seems like I'm skipping. I'm trying to skip the copyrighted material as much as I can because I already got one little slap on the wrist for my Writing Wednesdays, because apparently if you play Chopin music that's being performed by someone else, you get dinged for copyright, even though you are listening to Chopin, and Chopin is in the public domain. I do not know how it works, but whatever.
Period. I guess I laid an egg.
Of course, Adam West as Batman was the atypical comic book character come to life. 6'2", square jaw, as I envisioned him in the comic book. And the whole idea of the TV show was to play it straight. It's Boy Scout time all the way.
Sorry, Batman. I'm afraid the boy is underage. It's the law.
Caped Crusader continues. And remember, Batman Fun also continues every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Family Channel.
Batman the movie 89. It's been a long time in coming. We started to do this movie 9 years ago, believe it or not. The movie is film noir. It has a different look to it. The sets are awesome. They look like Fritz Lang's Metropolis or Blade Runner. They have a futuristic and yet an old look to them, of the 40s of New York, of Gotham, plus a futuristic look. Looks like a city erupted. It looks like almost a Holocaust. It's an unusual set against the backdrop for the Joker and the Batman to fight their little scenario against one another.
The scenario feels more like it was just a promo for both the Batman TV show and the Batman movie. But I do believe him when he was listing off his influences, because you can definitely see Zorro in there, and they even changed up Batman's backstory where his family went to go see the Zorro movie, and that's before they ended up in the alleyway. So it's like, I do believe him on his influences, and especially with the Leonardo da Vinci invention, especially when you see the cape. Because, yeah, you can definitely see it there in the art style.
Of course, at the beginning, I always wanted Jack Nicholson for the Joker. He has a maniacal quality about him, even without makeup. Now the search was on for Batman. Well, the atypical Batman, you think the way they would go would be to get a Batman 6'2", the hunk, the way I envisioned him at the beginning in the Batman comic book, and also kind of like an Adam West type. This here was a three-dimensional realistic film. This wasn't to be campy, it wasn't to be a comedy. We weren't going to camp it up. We wanted it to be realistic. So Tim Burton and I had a discussion, the director and I, and the powers brokers at Warner Brothers, and decided that we may go against typecasting, because we couldn't find anyone in Hollywood.
I wonder if Tim Burton ever spoke about... ignore that. Alright. Alright, we're not going to watch a clip directly. So... it is so weird seeing Tim Burton look so young. He looks like a little kid. Even though he was like, what, in his 20s? Let's see. Now, what on earth was this about?
You know, you could be a troublemaker. I study under the master. This happened out here. Happened at this show. I forget exactly when it was, but I had written both volumes of the history of comics, including my Batman section. Anybody not know who Bob Kane is?
What?
Anybody not know who Bob Kane is? They know. Okay. That was his sister speaking, probably. That's his sister. And somebody collared me in the middle of the day. It was kind of middle of the afternoon, and they said, would you like to meet Bob Kane? Well, I had written a lot about Bob in the history, but I never met him. I did interview many of his associates and hung out with quite a few of them, so I knew a lot about Kane. And I did something with the history of comics that I thought would be philosophically positive. You don't need me to tell you what's wrong with comics. So I never pulled a negative thread in comics at all. I never went in that direction. All the stories I told in the history of comics were positive stories. So I tried to keep it cool. I tried to keep personalities out of it. So this guy brought me over to this group, maybe about 5 people. There was this one guy who was wearing patent leather shoes. Comic.
Oh my.
An ascot.
I wonder when this was, because when did ascots go out of fashion? I think they went out of fashion in the mid-70s, didn't they?
Is that enough of a reason? Anyway, Bob knew who I was, because he had read his chapter of the history at least, and probably only his chapter of the history. And we talked for just a few minutes. He was standing in front of the elevator. Obviously, his group was going somewhere. The elevator doors opened, everybody got in. At the last moment, Bob turned around and he said, "See you later, Jim, baby."
What?
And he cuffed me.
What?
Across my face.
Huh?
And doors closed before I could do anything. No, man, I was in shock. You know, that some stranger would like lay his hands on me like that. "See you later, Jim, baby." I tried. I really, really tried to sleep that night. Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. And the more time that would go by, the more angry I became about this little incident.
I wonder if the comments down below have any stories about Bob Kane. I'm honestly glad he but I feel bad for yeah. So 12 minutes ago, I didn't know who the hell Jim Siranko was. Added here by a friend, and watching him, I'll never forget him. Oh! Here's a comment. Alright, back in the 1970s, I mail-ordered some comics from Bill Finger. They were probably reference issues or extra copies he got while working. I'm glad I was able to help get some money to him, if only a few bucks. I wish I had kept my canceled purchase check with his signature on it. I never thought about such things back then when I was an early teenager. Jeez. Someone's driving out there with, oh, maybe it's the Batmobile too. Oh, no, wait, it's just, what the heck is that thing? Whatever it was, it had lights bright as the sun. My goodness. So, looks like we had a few comments on it. I was hoping to get more testimonials.
And it didn't only have to do with this, but it had to do with everything I heard over the years about this guy. Listen to me. Not one guy in the whole history of comics, in the brotherhood of comic artists, writers, publishers, not one guy had a good Bob Kane story. You know Bill Finger? Bill was, as far as I'm concerned, the guy who put Batman on the map. He's a brilliant brilliant writer. He invented the big props, for example. Rob, the Joker, there's a kind of dichotomy here. Jerry Robinson said he created the Joker, which I reported in my History of Comics. But Bill told me that the Joker came from a ride out in Coney Island. So there was this big Joker type of character in front of this concession, and he said, what a great villain that character would make. So I'm thinking that the Joker is really part Robinson and certainly part Finger. And I got to know Bill. I'd see him up at the DC offices, and whenever I'd see him, I'd always take him out to dinner because I'm not sure exactly what it was or if it's any of your business anyway. But Bill was always liked. And I felt the least I could do was buy him a good dinner when I was out there. And it was great because he remembered everything. He was a guy who recalled detail and he could tell stories. He was a great entertainer, really. He was like...
Let me know, guys, if you want me to do an episode on Bill Finger.
I was taking a History of Comics lesson from Bill. And at the end of all of our dinners, I'd say, hey, Bill, can you use a $20 bill to the end of the week? A couple bucks. Because I knew Bill was always low. I'm not even sure he had money to take a cab home. And I knew he'd never get that money back. But I had a lot of years of Bill Finger scripts, Bill Finger stories. And I'm not sure there was a better writer in comics than Bill. But everything he did, all of his work was funneled through Kane. Kane controlled the purse strings of everybody who worked for him, including Jerry Robinson. So he took an agent cut. Or agent cuts are like 10, 15, 20%, right?
What the heck's an agent cut? Wait, so he was acting like their agent too? Crossword clue? So I'm guessing agent cut means he got cut as the creative agent. And again, yeah, he deserves his credit, but so does everybody else. I wonder. Yeah, Jerry Robinson was also discredited by Kane.
50%. You want to work on my Batman book? 50.
50%?
You get to like this guy even more?
That is actually very insane.
Let me tell you a little. I don't usually tell this story, but there's one thing that eternally pleases me. It's watching people who are so damn smart they outsmart themselves. You know these people? And when Kane created Batman, and I say that in quotes because the name Batman had been around for a long time in pop culture, including on the cover of Spicy Mystery Stories. Title of the story was Batman, right on the cover.
There's also a Spider story, a villain called the Batman, and it's a Spider story.
It's all over the place. But anyway, he had this idea for a Batman character and took it to DC. They liked the idea. It was a good concept. I always said that Batman was the comic book version of the Shadow. If you know the Shadow and Lamont Cranston, the Playboy millionaire, and it's really a matrix for the Batman formula.
Well, I know that Razor Fist definitely drew the comparisons with the Shadow and Batman, and you can see some of it in some of the mannerisms of early Batman. And I don't know if he was one of the influences of Batman for sure, because it certainly does look that way. Though maybe Bob Kane never mentions the Shadow, because I think even he knew he could not get away with that, because the Shadow was also very popular back in the day, and people would have caught on very quickly. So maybe it was one of the influences, maybe it wasn't, but I wouldn't put it past Bob Kane to not mention it.
Well, anyway, Bob's father was a lawyer, and he said, you know, you ought to make a deal with these guys that you get a percentage of everything they license. If they're licensing toys or games or costumes or ephemera or whatever it is, you get paid for it. Well, comics weren't quite like that in those days, but somehow, and I'm not exactly sure how, Kane got them to sign a contract whereby you got a piece of everything that was licensed out of Batman.
That is brilliant on Kane's part. However, this is another reminder: always read the contract before you sign it. And in fact, a lot of people from the entertainment industry, I think even Clownfish TV has said to either bring someone who knows about these entertainment contracts or get yourself a lawyer who can help you go through the contracts, because they can and will sneak shit in there to screw you over.
Pretty smart, wouldn't you say? Can anybody name a Batman toy from the 40s? Puzzle? Costume? Anybody? 50s? You know why? There aren't any. This is why. When the licensors would come up to DC and say, yeah, you know, we want to make these toys and we'd like to base it on your characters. How about this guy, Batman, over here? He looks interesting. Legal guys at DC would say, you don't want the Batman. You want Superman. And so Kane outsmarted himself. I hope that gave him a little bit of pain along the way. So these are some of the stories I was thinking about that morning when I was hunting him down.
Oh boy.
I found him. Found him about noontime. With this little knot of people around him. Patent leather shoes. Ascot. I walked up to him and I said, you remember me?
Yep.
And he said, sure, it's Durango. And I bitch slapped him across the face.
Probably not the smartest move to do that in front of a whole bunch of witnesses, but you know what? He's the one who hit first, so I can't really blame him for returning fire. So, alright.
And I said, see you later, Bob, baby. This is what I found out. He was a head taller than me, at least. But by the time I got there, I was so angry. I was hoping he'd do something. I was hoping he'd take a punch at me. This is what I regret about the whole incident. I regret he didn't take a punch at me, because I would have had him on the bat floor in a moment. You would have seen some real bad blood at that time. Anyway, Kane was a coward. He had no guts at all. And now, all of you know it.
was thinking about doing this interview with Bob Kane, but let's all right, lengthy interview with Bob Kane, co-creator with Bill Finger of Batman. You'll hear Kane's version of the story and even see him draw Batman live on camera. Not that I want to deprive you guys of more content, but I feel like this interview is going to be more of the same of the other two interviews where he's basically just advertising for another Batman property. Because I really was disappointed. I really thought that we would get at least some more about him, but every time he talks about Batman, it seems more like an advertisement and not like he really wants to go in depth with it or even really wants to talk too much about it. If you look back at the old books, you can actually find examples of him tracing his own ghost artists. Not to mention how much the old Batman stories were directly traced from other books altogether. Yeah. It's just really disappointing. This has to be the first one of these episodes that I've done on I'm an Artist where I end the episode more disappointed than I feel like I've learned something. I mean, I've known about the whole Bob Kane, Bill Finger thing long before doing this episode, and I knew that it was a messy situation. And I don't know, I was kind of hoping to come into this episode thinking, okay, we'll hear more about Bob Kane's side. There's probably a hell of a lot more going on behind the scenes. And you know what? Maybe I would even learn to see his perspective. And while I do think it was smart for him to write that contract to protect his own butt when it came to copywriting, I just feel very disappointed. But, let's see. I'll keep that I'll put this in this interview in the description for you guys to watch. Let's see. Comic Pros talk about Bob Kane. Maybe there's some other, like, old Golden Age heroes who talk, or Golden Age comic creators who talked about Batman. So, Hulu discusses. Oh yeah, there's the him with Stan Lee. Let's see if we can find part 1 because it's got part 2. Where's part 1? Well, let's take a look at this. Boop-a-doo.
Batman is a good idea. It's interesting, the writer of Batman.
What the heck is this? Why is Goku here?
The fellow who created Batman, Bob Kane, was a friend of mine. And he was a funny guy, just the opposite of me. He would go to a restaurant with me, we'd have dinner. The minute the waiter came over, do you know who I am? I'm Bob Kane. I created Batman. Here, I'll draw you a picture. I wanted to crawl under the table. I would never say anything like that.
The Marvel movies are the biggest money-making movies of all. And, it's funny. I keep
fun just to make them different. I really enjoy doing it.
Now, DC.
Oh, this is not what I was expecting. But I'll add this one to the description too. Alright, let's go back up here, because... Alright, so let's try clicking on this and seeing if we can... Oh, dang it. Skip.
Now tell me something.
Yeah.
Alright, let's see if we can go back to see if we can find a part 1. Alright, part 3. Alright, here's part 1. Let's see if we can get some more info.
Hello, heroes. This is Stan Lee, and I've got a rare treat for you today. Not only is he a good friend of mine, but he's one of the top names and one of the top talents in the comic book business. So without any further ado, my buddy, Bob Kane. Glad to have you
I
here,
thought you were
Bob.
Bob Kane. I'm Stan Lee.
Well, I'll settle for that, too.
Okay.
Bob, for the few people who come from another planet who may not know what you do, what is it that you're known for?
You got to be kidding.
I am, of course.
Well, originally I created Courageous Cat.
That was that animated show
an
you
animated
did, right?
cartoon. But I think when I was 18, I tripped across a character called Batman.
How do you pronounce it?
B-A-T dash man. It was called Batman by Robert Kane. In
I've heard of that.
1939, when I was 3 years old, Stan. That's when I created the Batman. I'm now 42 on my good days. Anyway, Batman is my claim to infamy.
Yeah, I always thought it was the cat, and Batman sort of came along accidentally. But okay, we'll talk. How about if we talk about Batman instead of the cat? Would you like
well,
to do
Batman was first. Cat
This seems very scripted.
came later.
The cat came after the Batman.
Absolutely.
Right. Now, you seem to be fingering a book here, which I have a feeling if I twisted your arm, you might be willing to talk about a little bit,
Well,
right?
is this a commercial for me, Stan?
Before we talk about it,
Okay.
before we talk about
Okay.
it, let me just ask you this. How did you get into comics? Have you
Well,
always wanted to be a comic book artist? Writer?
Actually, no. I wanted to be a salesman. No, I wanted to be a truck driver. No, actually, when I was a kid, I was a doodler.
Uh-huh.
I lived in the Bronx in New York. I was a poor kid, very poor. And in fact, we were so poor, I used to wear my sister's hand-me-down dresses. No, we were poor, and a tough neighborhood, too, I lived in.
Must have made quite an impact with the dresses.
Well, yeah, in those days, you know, it was a little... at any rate, Stan, it was a short run from the subway to my home. It was a tough neighborhood. Thank you, Rodney Dangerfield. I was always doodling on the sidewalks in New York, on my school books. I loved cartoons my whole life. My dad was a printer for the Daily News, and he used to bring home the Sunday comics to me.
Really?
Yeah.
The Daily News Sunday comics?
Absolutely. He was a printer, and I'd have...
I thought he was a... oh, engraver, so, yeah.
Tracy and Orphan Annie and all of those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mutton Chef, Popeye.
Right, right.
And I used to copy him almost as...
Popeye was in the Journal American, I think.
I was in
Yeah.
those days, absolutely.
okay.
So my dad brought home the comics to me, and I used to copy them, and they looked as good as the originals. And my dad brought it downtown to all the famous cartoonists, and they said, hey, your son might have a future as a cartoonist.
Really? Is that-
Absolutely. The doodler from the Bronx, who became the famous cartoonist and a legend in his own mind along the way. But really, that's how it all started. I was always doodling, and I loved comics, and...
Were you working in comic books before you created Batman, or was that your entry into comics?
No, actually in 1936, when I was about 14 years old, or 15, I worked for Iger and Eisner, who had a comic book called Wow Comics.
Mm-hmm.
Wow Comics was one of the early comic books that printed original comic art, okay?
Yeah.
So I did some fill-ins for them, funny stuff, just laughs for $5 a page. The reason I didn't stay with them was I wanted...
I wonder how much $5 a page was back then. Because that doesn't sound like much-ish for a page rate. But then again, I believe nowadays a decent page rate is considered, what, $65? How much was it? Alright. Alright, inflation calculator. Alright, if 1936, I think he said. Oh, wow. So that would have been considered quite a bit. Okay, never mind. Wow. The page rates back then were much better than they are now, from what I've heard from modern comic artists.
$10 a page, and they wouldn't give it to me. Now, in 1936, believe it or not, $10 was a lot of money.
I know.
So they said, no, we passed. So I went over to DC Comics, unfortunately for them. Should have given me Will Eisner that $10, that $5 raise. You know, you lost out on a big thing, the Batman. And I went to DC doing fill-in
Eisner did fine.
comics, and then Whitney Ellsworth was an editor. Lo and behold, the plot thickens. And he said to me one day, I said to him rather, how much are Superman Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel making on the Superman comics? He said $75,000 a year apiece. I was making $5,000 a year for doing little fill-ins. He said, listen, Bob, could you do another superhero? I said, for that kind of money, you'll have it on Monday. This
For
was
that kind of money, you'd be the superhero.
Boy, you better believe it. I'll steal it somewhere.
Again, and I'm not blaming him for the hustle. Like, I get it. You gotta hustle, especially in the entertainment industry.
And I went home, and lo and behold, I thought about all my childhood heroes when I was a kid in my world of fantasy, such as Zorro, Douglas Fairbanks Sr., the Marcus Zorro I saw as a child. I love the movies, the early movies, serials and all that.
I remember.
And I saw a movie called The Bat with Chester Morris, and he wore a bat costume, only he was a villain.
Yeah.
And that also imbued me with an initiation for an inventive idea of Batman. And then the third influence was Leonardo da Vinci's flying machine. Leonardo had a flying machine 500 years ago.
Oh, I remember.
The
I
first
remember the
glider,
drawing of it. Yeah.
An ornithopter.
Yeah.
I have a drawing in my book, and I'll show it to you later. And so the three influences at that time were Zorro, Leonardo da Vinci, and the Bat. And on Monday, I came up with a very crude drawing of Batman, and I showed it to Whitney Ellsworth, and he said, that's terrific. I said, how much a page do I get? He said, $10 a page. That was my number then, $10 a page. I thought I was a multimillionaire. I didn't know what to do with all that money.
Were. Yeah.
I had a date. I took it to the Paramount Theater. I went dancing at the Edison Green Room. We had dinner and 2 drinks. And the whole evening was $8. I took a subway home and couldn't afford a cab.
And
but
the
Ooh, Denny O'Neil talks about editing the Batman books in the 90s. Sounds interesting, but we're talking more about Bob Kane today, but I think we'll end it here because he's pretty much just recounting the story we've seen like 3 times already. And I don't know if we're going to have enough time to go through the other parts, and I don't want to just flat out play them because that's unfair to the original uploader. I think I'll call it a little early tonight, folks. Sorry, it's only 10 minutes shorter, which was a bit longer than my last stream anyways. So yeah, that was Bob Kane. I'm sorry if I sounded a little bitter throughout the entire episode, but yeah, I will have this video edited and posted to X. Alright, if you want to vote on the next person that I cover on this channel, go to Heather_Veely on X, And I guess I will catch you all in the next one. Thank you for watching and have a good night. Bye.